The broken wagon wheel cast a jagged shadow across Serafina Hartwell's face as she lay beneath its splintered shelter. 2 days without water had carved hollows beneath her cheekbones. The Arizona sun pressed down through the gaps in the wood. Her lips moved in silent prayer to a god who seemed as distant as Boston. The desert stretched endlessly in all directions. No birdsong, no wind, just the terrible silence of a land that swallowed hope. A shadow fell across her face. Different from the wagon's shadow, moving. She tried to lift her head. The world tilted sideways. Hallucinations had visited her before. Her father's voice calling her name. The sound of church bells from home. This time it was footsteps in the sand. I found you. The voice came from somewhere deep and careful, like water over stones. She forced her eyes open. A man knelt beside her, dark hair touched with silver at the temples, eyes the color of winter sky. His face was weathered but gentle. Real. He lifted her head. Water touched her cracked lips, cool and sweet. She drank greedily until he pulled the canteen away. Easy now. His hands were steady as he checked her forehead for fever. She tried to speak but only managed to whisper, "Who are you?" He didn't answer. Instead, he gathered her in his arms and lifted her from beneath the wagon. She weighed nothing. The desert had stolen her substance, along with her hope. His horse stood nearby, a paint mare with intelligent eyes. He mounted with Serafina cradled against his chest. She felt his heartbeat through his shirt, strong and even. The ride passed in a haze of heat and motion. Mountains rose ahead of them. Purple shadows promised cooler air. She drifted between sleep and waking. Sometimes she caught him watching her with those careful eyes. His ranch appeared suddenly between two canyon walls. A small house built from local stone, corrals and outbuildings scattered around it like afterthoughts. Everything clean and purposeful, no wasted motion in the design. He carried her inside. The house was sparse, but comfortable. A stone fireplace dominated one wall. Books lined makeshift shelves. Maps and sketches covered a wooden table, the home of a man who lived alone by choice. He laid her on a narrow bed in the corner, brought her water and thin broth, watched her drink without saying a word. When she tried to thank him, he just nodded and turned away. She slept for hours, maybe days. Time moved differently here. When she finally woke with a clear head, he was sitting at the table writing in a leather journal. Lamplight caught the silver threads in his hair. "What's your name?" she asked. He looked up from his writing, considered her question for a long moment. Then he tore a page from his journal and brought it to her. Tobias McKinnon was written in careful script. "You don't talk much, do you, Tobias?" He shrugged, returned to his table and his writing. She studied him while he worked. His movements were economical, precise, a man who had learned to live with only what was necessary. The opposite of everything she had known in Boston. 3 days passed this way. He brought her food and water, changed the dressings on her sun-damaged skin, watched her with those winter eyes but never pressed for her story. On the 4th morning she was strong enough to sit at the table. He brought her coffee and a plate of eggs, set a newspaper beside her plate. Her own face stared back at her from the front page. "Mail-order bride perishes in desert tragedy." The article was brief. A wagon had been found overturned 20 miles south. No survivors. Serafina Hartwell of Boston presumed dead. Her hands shook as she read. Someone had wanted her to disappear. Wanted the world to believe she was gone. "Jake Morrison," she whispered. Tobias looked up from his coffee. "My wagon driver. He left me there to die." She told him everything then, about her father's death in Boston, the mining claims, the arranged marriage to a man with cold eyes and bloody hands, her escape west as a mail-order bride, Jake's betrayal in the desert. Tobias listened without interruption. When she finished, he walked to a wooden chest in the corner, returned with a bundle of newspapers, more articles about her death, about the tragic loss of a young Boston woman seeking a new life in the territories, about her intended husband Samuel Crenshaw's grief at the news. "He remarried quickly," Tobias said quietly, his first words to her since the desert. She looked at the date on the latest paper. Samuel Crenshaw had wed another woman 3 days after news of Seraphine's death reached town, a railroad heiress from California. The truth settled over her. Like dust, she had never been meant to reach the altar. Her death had been the plan all along. "I can't go back," she said. "No." Tobias gathered the newspapers. "You can't. What do I do now?" He was quiet for a long moment. Outside, the wind picked up. It rattled the windows and set the horses nickering in the corral. "You stay," he said finally, "until we figure out what comes next." She nodded. There was nowhere else to go, no one else who would believe her story. The world thought Serafina Hartwell was dead. Maybe it was better. That way that night she lay in the narrow bed listening to the desert wind. Tobias sat by the dying fire cleaning his rifle, not because he expected trouble, but because a man lived longer when he stayed ready for it. She was alive when she should have been dead, hidden when she should have been found, safe when she should have been afraid. For the first time in months she slept without nightmares. Serafina woke to the sound of digging. Through the window she watched Tobias working behind the house. His shovel struck stone repeatedly, the same rhythm, the same spot. For 3 hours she dressed and walked outside. The morning air carried the scent of sage and something else, something sacred. What are you burying? He stopped digging, wiped sweat from his forehead with the back of his hand, pointed to a collection of carved stones arranged carefully beside the hole. Native markings covered each stone, symbols she didn't recognize but somehow understood. They spoke of reverence, of things that should not be disturbed. They came through last week, he said quietly. Government men, looking for reasons to take the land. She knelt beside the stones. The carving was ancient, deliberate, sacred. Your mother's people. He nodded, resumed digging. She worked beside him without being asked. Her hands blistered quickly, but she didn't stop. The sun climbed higher, sweat soaked through her dress. Still they dug. By midday they had buried the stones deep enough to keep them safe. Tobias smoothed the earth over them, scattered loose rocks to hide the disturbance. Erasure that felt like betrayal but looked like survival. Why don't you speak? She asked as they walked back to the house. He was quiet for so long, she thought. He wouldn't answer. Words failed me once, when it mattered most. She understood. Some silences carved themselves so deep that breaking them felt dangerous. That afternoon she found his collection of journals, 20 volumes stacked on a shelf near the window, all filled with his careful handwriting. Stories he couldn't speak, written in ink that never faded. You write beautifully, she said. He looked up from the harness he was mending. Color touched his cheeks. You read them, just a few pages. I hope you don't mind. He shrugged, but she caught him watching her hands as she turned the pages, pride and embarrassment warring in his expression. Teach me, she said. What? How to survive here. How to read the land the way you do. He considered this, set down the leather strap he'd been working in return. I'll help you with your writing. Some of the words are misspelled. Not many, but some. His smile was small but genuine, the first she'd seen from him. The lessons began the next morning. He showed her how to track water by following game trails, how to identify edible plants by their leaves and roots, how to read weather in the behavior of birds. She corrected his grammar while he taught her to start fires with flint and steel. They worked through arithmetic problems while practicing knots that wouldn't slip under pressure. The exchange felt natural, necessary, like breathing. A week passed this way, then another. Seraphine's hands grew calloused. Her skin darkened under the desert sun. She learned to move quietly across rocky ground, to listen for sounds that didn't belong. Tobias spoke more each day. His voice was rusty, from disuse but rich with intelligence. He told her about the plants that bloomed only after rain, about the history written in canyon walls, about his mother's stories of the old ways. She told him about Boston, about libraries filled with more books than he could imagine, about concert halls and museums and streets lit by gas lamps, a world that felt distant now, unreal. Do you miss it? He asked one evening as they sat by the fire. Parts of it, the parts that weren't trying to kill me. He nodded, understanding without explanation. That night she noticed him watching her hands as she wrote in his journal, correcting a passage about seasonal migration patterns. His attention felt different now, warmer. She looked up to find him studying her face in the lamplight. What? Nothing, but he didn't look away. The next morning brought visitors, 2 men in federal uniforms riding hard toward the house. Dust clouds marked their approach from miles away. Tobias went silent. The old silence, the kind that built walls. Stay inside, he said. She watched from the window as the men dismounted. Official badges caught sunlight. Their faces were hard, with authority and suspicion. McKinnon, we need to talk. About what? Reports of illegal activity on your land. Destruction of potential mining sites. Tobias said nothing. His silence stretched until it became uncomfortable, accusatory. We have authority to search the property, the taller man said. Search for what? Evidence of tampering with geological surveys, hiding valuable deposits from proper assessment. They spent an hour walking the property, poking at rock formations with metal rods, taking measurements, making notes in official ledgers. Serafina held her breath when they passed over the spot where the sacred stones lay buried. The men found nothing, but their suspicion remained. This isn't over, McKinnon. Territory needs development, not hermits hoarding resources. After they left, Tobias sat in his chair staring at the fire. His jaw worked silently, anger and fear fighting for control. They'll be back, he said finally. What will you do? Keep protecting what needs protecting. That night she couldn't sleep. She rose and found him sitting at the table with something small cupped in his palms. Lamplight revealed a silver locket, tarnished but beautiful. Where did you get that? He looked up, startled. It was my mother's. Seraphine's hand went to her throat, to the chain hidden beneath her dress. She pulled out an identical locket, same size, same pattern, same tarnish. They stared at each other across the table. That's impossible, she whispered. Tobias opened his locket. Inside was a faded photograph of a woman with kind eyes and traditional Apache dress. The other half of the locket was empty. Serafina opened hers with trembling fingers. The photograph inside showed a man in a mining outfit, weathered face, determined expression, her father. But tucked behind the photograph was something else. A thin piece of paper covered with symbols and markings. A map. My father gave me this before he died, she said. Told me to keep it safe. Tobias studied the map. His face went pale. These markings, they show silver deposits. What? Your father found silver on Apache land, my mother's land. The pieces fell together slowly. Her father's mysterious death, the mining consortium in Boston, Samuel Crenshaw's sudden interest in marriage, the arranged accident in the desert. They killed him for this, she said. They killed her too. The truth hung between them heavy as smoke. Their fates had been tangled together long before they met. Blood and greed had stolen their families, but the same forces that destroyed their past had brought them together in the present. Outside, the wind picked up. It rattled the windows and set the horses restless in their corral. Storm weather coming, the kind that changed everything. Tobias reached across the table, touched her hand with fingers that trembled slightly. We're not safe here anymore, she nodded. The government men would return with more authority, more suspicion, and somewhere in the distance Jake Morrison was still alive, still dangerous. But tonight they had truth, and they had each other. The rest could wait until morning. The riders appeared at dawn, 4 dark shapes against the red sky, moving with purpose toward the ranch. Serafina watched from the window as Tobias stepped onto the porch. His rifle hung loose in his hands, ready but not threatening. Years of solitude had taught him to read danger in the distance. Jake Morrison rode at the front. His face was harder than she remembered, scarred by desert sun and failed schemes. Behind him rode 3 men she didn't recognize. Their weapons were clean, professional. Morning, McKinnon, Jake called out as they approached. Tobias said nothing. His silence was a wall between them. We're here for the woman. She owes us money. What woman? Jake's laugh was dry as dust. Don't play games. We tracked her here. No, she's been hiding under your protection. Serafina moved to the door. Tobias held up a hand without looking back. Stay inside. Stay hidden. You boys are on private land, Tobias said quietly. Land that might not be yours much longer. Government's taking a real interest in this place. The threat hung in the air between them. Jake's men spread out slightly. Casual movements that created better angles, cleaner shots. She's under my protection, Tobias said. The words carried weight, finality, a line drawn in sand that had hardened to stone. Jake studied him with calculating eyes. You haven't spoken to another soul in what, 2 years? Now you're making stands for some Boston woman. 3 years. Tobias shifted his grip on the rifle, and yes, the silence stretched tight. Serafina could feel the violence building, pressure in the air before a storm breaks. Here's what's going to happen, Jake said. You're going to step aside. We're going to collect what we're owed. Then we'll leave you to your hermit life. No one word. Simple. Absolute. Jake's hand moved toward his pistol, stopped when Tobias raised his rifle slightly, not aiming, just ready. You willing to die for her? Tobias considered the question seriously. Are you willing to die for money? The standoff held for heartbeats. Then Jake noticed something that made his confidence waver. Tobias wasn't looking at him anymore. He was watching the ground behind the horses. Loose shale covered the slope they'd ridden down, stable enough for careful passage, deadly if the weight shifted wrong. Problem is, Tobias said conversationally, you boys picked a poor spot to make threats. He pointed with his chin toward the rocky slope behind them that shale's been wanting to slide for months. Just needs the right encouragement. Jake's eyes flicked back toward the slope. Understanding crept across his face. You move those horses wrong, you'll all go down with the rocks, Tobias continued. Long way to the bottom, longer walk back up. One of Jake's men shifted nervously in his saddle. His horse danced sideways, pebbles scattered down the slope. Course, Tobias said. I know every safe path off this ridge. Been walking them for years. The tactical advantage had shifted without a shot fired. Geography was Tobias's ally now. The land itself chose sides. This isn't over, Jake said. But his voice carried less conviction. No, it's not. They backed their horses away carefully. Too proud to retreat quickly but too smart to stay. Jake's eyes promised future violence, but his hand stayed clear of his weapons. When they were gone, Serafina came outside. Her legs shook with delayed fear. Will they come back with more men? Better planning. She sat heavily on the porch steps. The morning sun felt cold on her skin. I should leave, go somewhere else, let you have your peace back. Tobias sat beside her, close enough that she could feel the warmth from his body. Peace isn't hiding, it's having something worth protecting. Before she could respond, another rider appeared on the horizon. Alone this time, moving with the confidence of a man who owned whatever he surveyed, Samuel Crenshaw rode a black stallion that matched his expensive suit. Even in the desert he looked like a boardroom, all sharp edges and calculated charm. Serafina, he called out as he approached. Thank God you're alive. His relief sounded genuine, practiced, the kind of emotion that convinced juries and shareholders. Samuel, she stood slowly. Tobias rose beside her. When I heard about the accident, I was devastated. My new wife insisted I come personally to search for survivors. The lie was smooth as silk, believable to anyone who didn't know the truth. How convenient, Serafina said. Samuel dismounted, adjusted his jacket. I've brought men to escort you safely back to town. You'll want for nothing, the trauma you've endured. His eyes moved over her changed appearance. The sun-darkened skin, the calloused hands, the simple clothes, calculating adjustments to his plans. I'm not going anywhere with you, Serafina. You're not thinking clearly. The desert does things to a person's mind. Tobias stepped forward slightly. Samuel noticed the movement, reassessed the situation. And you are? Tobias McKinnon. Ah, the hermit. Samuel's smile was condescending. I'm sure you've been kind to Serafina in her time of need, but she belongs with her own kind now. The casual cruelty in his words made Seraphine's hands clench. Her own kind. As if Tobias was something less than human. My own kind tried to kill me, she said. Samuel's expression didn't change. Surely you don't believe that wagon driver acted on anyone's orders. These frontier men are unpredictable, violent. I have the locket, Samuel. Now, his mask slipped. Just for a moment. But she caught it. What locket? The one my father gave me. With the map inside, Samuel's hand moved unconsciously toward his coat pocket, where his own weapon waited. You're clearly confused. Traumatized. There's no map. The silver deposits on Apache land, the ones you killed my father for, the truth hung between them, raw and unforgiving. Samuel's civilized facade cracked like drought-hardened earth. Your father was a drunk who died in an accident, nothing more. He found the silver, you had him murdered. Then you arranged for me to die in the desert so you could claim his discovery legally. Samuel's laugh was harsh. Prove it. Serafina pulled out the locket, opened it to reveal the map inside. This is all the proof I need. Samuel's hand moved toward his gun. Fast for a soft man, not fast enough. Tobias had his rifle trained on Samuel's chest before the pistol cleared leather. Easy now, Tobias said. Samuel froze, his gun half drawn, murder plain in his eyes. You're making a mistake, Samuel said. I have influential friends, government connections. So did the men who came here yesterday. Didn't make them right. Samuel slowly holstered his weapon, but his smile returned, cold and confident. This isn't over. You can't hide forever, and when you surface, I'll be waiting. He mounted his horse, adjusted his hat. Enjoy your wilderness romance. It won't last. He spurred his horse away, riding hard toward town, toward lawyers and bought judges and the kind of power that crushed truth beneath legal papers. Serafina sat back down on the steps, the weight of inevitability pressed down on her shoulders. He's right. We can't hide. Forever. Tobias leaned his rifle against the porch rail, sat beside her again. Then we don't hide what? We take the fight to them. On our terms. She studied his face, saw determination where once there had been resignation. The territorial capital. Federal marshals who aren't bought yet. It's dangerous. So is staying here. The wind picked up, carried the scent of distant rain. Change coming whether they wanted it or not. When do we leave? Tomorrow, before they can organize. That night they prepared for a journey that would determine everything. Tobias cleaned his weapons. Serafina copied the map onto separate paper. insurance against loss or theft. They worked in comfortable silence, to people who had found purpose in each other's survival. Outside, the desert wind howled through the canyons, wild and free and dangerous. Tomorrow they would be the same. They rode toward the territorial capital through country that opened like a prayer. Canyon walls gave way to rolling hills. Desert scrubs surrendered to grassland. The land itself seemed to breathe easier here. Serafina watched Tobias as they traveled. He spoke more with each mile, pointing out landmarks, sharing stories his mother had told him about the old trails, words flowing easier now that silence no longer felt safer than truth. "Tell me about her," Serafina said during their second day of travel. She was strong, stronger than the men who killed her. He was quiet for a long moment. Then the words came slowly. "She taught me that some things are worth more than safety, worth more than life." "What things?" "Honor, truth, the people you choose to protect." The federal courthouse in Prescott rose from the valley floor like a promise. Stone and mortar representing justice that couldn't be bought, at least not easily. They stabled their horses and walked through streets busy with commerce and government. Serafina felt exposed after weeks in the wilderness. Too many eyes, too many questions. Marshal William Hayes was a lean man with intelligent eyes and hands scarred by honest work. He listened to their story without interruption, examined the locket and map with careful attention. "These are serious accusations," he said finally. "We have proof," Serafina replied. "You have evidence. Proof requires more." He studied the map again, traced the markings with one finger. "I'll need witnesses, documentation, more than what's here. Samuel Crenshaw will deny everything." "Of course he will. Men like him always do." Hayes leaned back in his chair, considered them both carefully. "There's been talk, complaints about irregular mining claims, suspicious deaths. Your story fits a pattern." "What kind of pattern?" "The kind that powerful men create when they want something badly enough." Hayes stood and walked to a file cabinet, pulled out a thick folder. "We've been building a case against the Boston Consortium for months. Your evidence might be the missing piece." He spread papers across his desk. Mining claims, death certificates, witness statements, a web of corruption painted in official documents. "Your father wasn't the first to die mysteriously after finding valuable deposits." Serafina studied the papers. Names she didn't recognize, but circumstances that felt familiar. Men who found wealth and died shortly after. "Samuel Crenshaw's name appears in connection with several of these cases," Hayes continued, "always as a legitimate business partner, always inheriting claims after convenient accidents. Can you arrest him with your testimony and evidence?" "Yes, but it won't be easy. He has connections, money, lawyers who specialize in making problems disappear." That evening they stayed in a small hotel near the courthouse. Separate rooms but connected by purpose. Serafina lay awake listening to the sounds of civilization, voices through thin walls, footsteps on wooden stairs. The world felt too close after the desert's silence. A soft knock at her door made her sit up. Tobias stood in the hallway holding 2 cups of coffee. Couldn't sleep either. She let him in. They sat by the window looking out at the gaslit street below. "Are you afraid?" she asked, terrified. His honesty surprised her. Of losing this? "Whatever this is between us." She reached for his hand. His fingers were warm and calloused and steady. "You saved my life under that wagon. You saved mine too. Just took longer to realize it." The trial began 3 days later. Samuel Crenshaw arrived with a team of expensive lawyers and an air of injured innocence. He played the role of grieving almost husband perfectly. Serafina testified first, her voice steady as she recounted the conspiracy that killed her father, the arranged marriage, the planned murder in the desert. Samuel's lawyers attacked her credibility with surgical precision. "Miss Hartwell, isn't it true that desert exposure can cause hallucinations, paranoid delusions?" "My mind is clear enough to remember details that conveniently support your accusations." Marshal Hayes presented the physical evidence methodically. The map, the matching lockets, the pattern of suspicious deaths. Samuel's lawyers disputed everything. Then Tobias took the stand. His testimony was quiet but devastating. He spoke of finding Serafina near death, of nursing her back to health, of the threats from Jake Morrison and Samuel himself. "Why should we believe the word of a man who chooses to live apart from civilized society?" Samuel's lead attorney asked. Tobias considered the question seriously. "Because I have nothing to gain from lying, no money to make, no reputation to protect, just truth." The attorney pressed harder. "Isn't it convenient that you happened to find Miss Hartwell, that you alone witnessed these alleged threats?" "I didn't find her by accident. The courtroom went silent. What do you mean? Marshal Hayes asked. I'd been tracking Jake Morrison for weeks. He was bragging in saloons about a job in the desert, about leaving someone to die. This was new information. Even Serafina stared at him in surprise. So you knew she was out there? I knew someone was. Took me 2 days to find her. The revelation changed everything. Tobias hadn't stumbled across her by chance. He'd been searching deliberately, risking his own safety to save a stranger. Samuel's composure finally cracked during his own testimony. Pressed about the timeline of his second marriage, he grew defensive, angry. I mourned appropriately. But life continues. Business continues. Business that required Serafina Hartwell's death, Hayes asked. She died in an accident. An accident? You arranged? That's ridiculous. But his denial came too quickly, too forcefully. The jury noticed. The verdict came after 2 days of deliberation. Guilty on all charges. Conspiracy to commit murder, fraud, theft of mining rights. Samuel Crenshaw was sentenced to 20 years in territorial prison. His consortium was dissolved. All illegally obtained claims were returned to rightful owners or designated as protected land. Outside the courthouse, Serafina and Tobias stood. In afternoon sunlight that felt different now, cleaner. The weight of justice accomplished. What happens now? She asked. Now we go home. Your ranch, our ranch, if you'll have it. She turned to face him fully, saw the question in his winter eyes, the hope he was afraid to voice. Are you asking me to marry you, Tobias McKinnon? I'm asking you to stay. Marriage is just what we call it when two people choose each other permanently. 6 months later, they stood in the canyon behind their home. The repaired wagon served as an altar. Marshal Hayes had ridden out to perform the ceremony. The only witness was the land itself. The sacred stones rested safely in their hidden places. The Apache burial grounds were legally protected under federal treaty. Tobias had been appointed as official guardian with a government salary to match his responsibilities. They'd found silver on the legitimate portions of their claim. Enough to live comfortably. Not enough to attract the kind of attention that destroyed lives. That evening they sat beneath stars that stretched endless and bright above the desert. The old wagon cast familiar shadows in the moonlight. Do you ever regret it? Serafina asked. Giving up your solitude? Tobias pulled her closer. I was never alone by choice, just by necessity. And now I have something worth more than safety. The wind moved through the canyon walls, soft and warm and full of promise. Serafina closed her eyes and listened to the sound of home. I found you, Tobias whispered against her hair. And I found you too. The desert held them in its ancient embrace, two people who had been lost discovering that sometimes the best way to find yourself is to save someone else first. Above them the stars wheeled in their eternal dance, constant as love, reliable as truth, beautiful as second chances given freely to hearts brave enough to accept them. And that is all to the story, for now. Please let me know where you are tuning in from. Perhaps we will create a story there. Consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel, and if you enjoy our content, click this video on your screen. I promise you, it's worth watching. See you tomorrow.